Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 45th edition of Cannabis Live. I'm Craig Aronoff.
Travis Copenhaver.
Welcome. We're with the Cannabis Legal Group in Royal Oak, Michigan. Here in Michigan's new medical marijuana market. We'll be talking about a number of different things, but we first want to say thank you to those that participate, that like us, share us, actually say hello to us when they see us at different communities, and thank us for the videos that we do. We really appreciate the feedback, and we put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this. Want to make sure it's a valuable resource for all those that follow us. Today we're going to be talking about a wide range of things.
Yeah, a bit of a laundry list today.
Yeah, so we know that there was the ballot initiative and the exciting news about that yesterday. There's been a lot of things going on around municipalities around the state. And it's just like it's the spring and it's in the air, the flowers are coming out, and I think a lot of communities are starting to see that the state does have some things together, and this is really moving forward. And so last thing we'll talk about is a requirement of your phase 2 application and marketing plans. May not be the most exciting topic, but it's necessary.
It is.
So please follow along. So I suppose, Travis, you guys, you Nick did a great job a couple weeks ago talking about the ballot initiative itself and getting into the mud about the details of that. And so we're really not going to focus on that per se today, but be happy to answer any questions on it by all means as you, again, send us questions right here on the site. We do our best to answer them live as we're moving. If not, we'll try to deal with it after the fact. But as I was saying, you and Nick did a great job kind of getting into the details. So to the extent that we can kind of just talk about what was the ballot initiative, and what does it mean that the Board of Canvassers approved it yesterday, and what does that mean for us moving forward?
So basically what it means is we can now expect to see the question on the November ballot. So they turned in the signatures. The state reviewed the signatures to make sure enough of those signatures were of the type that qualified. I think they were right around over 20,000 signatures over what they needed, at a minimum to get onto the ballot. And as far as everything's looking, it's checked out. Everything's valid, and we can now expect there to be some political action of, encouraging people to get out to vote. So.
Yeah, so, I think that yesterday was real exciting. First of all, it was a 4-0 vote from the board. So, what that really means is that they cleared the hurdle with the signatures exceedingly. We needed roughly 250.
They did a bang up job on the signatures.
Yeah.
There was no question, there was some issues last time they tried, groups tried to get marijuana for Michigan. There's some legal problems. Here, all the signatures checked out. It's beyond a doubt done correctly. It's going to be on the ballot.
Yeah, and all the compliments to the team at
Congratulations,
Coalition and MI Legalize and all the teams and that really put this together, and the great work that the fundraisers, Robin and the like, and Sam and those, that it was really couldn't be more grateful for that effort.
You've done the industry a service, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And so as this ballot initiative, what we'll start to see next is, of course, fundraising. It's important that we continue to advertise and push the ballot initiative so that it makes the public aware and educates the public on what it really is and what it really means for the benefits to the citizens here in Michigan and those that are tourists here, and how we can decriminalize this plant and allow for us to use our law enforcement resources in other ways. But it's important that we don't just say, hey, we made it to the ballot, that's enough.
Right. And while we've had some great news with some good polling showing that it's getting quite a bit of support, it's important to not let that discourage you from going to the polls. Even if everything looks great, if you support marijuana, you support this ballot, you support recreational adult use in Michigan, go to the polls. I don't care if they're pre-polling at 80-90% approval rating. You still have to get out there and make your vote count. It's incredibly important, and we've seen elections in recent history show surprises can happen, and it's important to make sure that if you truly support this, you get out there and you vote yes on the proposal.
Yeah, definitely, and get out that vote and talk to people, educate them. Again, donate to the cause as best you can, participate, volunteer. We're still going to need a lot of help. There is a large contingent of protagonists that are coming into the state. Barton debated one of their, Barton Morris of our law firm debated one of their lead advocates last night, and as I understand it, kind of took them to task on all their on their position, because quite frankly, it's not supported by the facts.
Right. But we are starting to see money come in to support opposition to a ballot like this. So, regardless of, it's hard for people like us and probably most of our audience to appreciate that because we're so close to and supportive of cannabis. But there are a lot of people that feel differently, and they're going to come out and try to oppose this whole measure. And it's important to do what you can, regardless of your standing, to support the movement here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we talk a little bit further past just, assisting the community in making that happen, the next aspect of it is what does it mean? Like, so it'll be on the ballot, but, then what?
Right.
So hopefully it does be voted voted positively. But, at that point in time, there's going to be a transition here where, it doesn't automatically happen overnight. The state's going to have some transitions. We're going to have a lot of municipalities that have to revisit some things that we've been talking about here over the last year with the MMFLA. And so I think that kind of segues well into what, the municipalities. And, as Travis and I were talking in preparation of the show today, a common observation that we both see, and as much as we collaborate and work together, we're often flying in different directions throughout the day and evenings into different municipalities. There's a lot of activity right now. It's unbelievable.
It's hard to keep track of everything. I used to joke with people when they come in, back when there was 2 MMFLA ordinances, I knew exactly what they all said. I knew exactly what you needed to know and what you didn't. But, we have so many now, and they keep getting changed and updated, and more communities are starting to talk about it. Like, it's exciting. We're seeing MMFLA movement. More of those newcomers, those people sitting on the fence, are starting to get the information they were waiting for from the state. They can look to their sister municipalities for insight as to what's a good way to do this, or what are some similar concerns what we were trying to articulate, laid out in an ordinance we can review and see if it's to our liking to incorporate into our community. We're starting to see, those same arguments you'll hear every time. I thought it was federally illegal, kind of starting to fall on deaf ears because, quite frankly, that's irrelevant to the type of conduct that these communities are asked to do.
Absolutely. And, of course, at the federal level, we know that there's been a lot of recent activity with Southern Gardner from Colorado, at least getting what I would view from Trump himself, the idea that maybe the Cole memo and its protections are still being honored. Yeah. Even though Sessions threw out the letter itself, the idea of deprioritizing marijuana seems to still be within the realm of likelihood as to where we're at to continue moving this medical market forward. As we're talking about these communities too, we're kind of like just envisioning, it seems like different corridors and segments of our state have really started to participate. Many along the major freeways, many small municipal towns and villages, off the beaten path as well. But even if we tried to sum up our total, maybe we're at around 100 right now, give or take.
Yeah, it's hard to measure.
That's an aggressive number.
Yeah,
it's probably something less than that.
There's quite a few communities that have basically intended to opt in and have formally said, yes, we're going to do it, and are taking their time putting their actual ordinances together. So it's hard to necessarily identify them.
And a few communities, quite frankly, we find out, less allergies. Yeah. So, in a few communities that are more rural and, quite frankly, they've opted in and they're participating. So I want to give a percentage of those just to add to the list that are just literally unknowns that we find out about later. Because that's happening with regularity in terms of, us getting communication from people that have compliant property with, even permits that are in place we didn't even know was considering or whatnot. So again, we encourage people to let us know. We are doing our best to keep our map updated and active, and Ryan is killing it here at our firm to do that. And so if you know of a place or an opportunity to get business done in the MMFLA, by all means, keep us posted on that. But what it also means is that we have approximately out of the 1,700 communities around the state of Michigan, even providing my aggressive number, 5-6% of the total municipalities in our state are actually participating.
Right.
There's a lot of work to be done. A lot of new communities that are coming on board. We got a lot of people that are saying, I can't find a building, or maybe I went to a community the day after it got opted in and the prices are too high. This is the time to start maybe finding that perfect property for you in a community that either hasn't addressed it, was waiting for somebody to get there, or maybe they talked about it a year ago before anybody knew anything and they're more open to it today than you'd actually anticipate. But again, nobody's asked them to reconsider it. We hear that a lot. We'll call communities. Nobody's called us. Of course we want to talk about it, but we're not going to do it by ourselves. And so again, as you're looking in places, just don't let that be the only factor that determines whether or not you want to look at a property a little deeper.
Right.
With the right advocacy, the right lobbying, and the right people involved, there might be a great opportunity, to turn a community that was either red or yellow, or maybe in that gray area still that we know nothing about.
And let's be real here too. I mean, sometimes the way these ordinances come to be, it creates a competitive situation over where those good properties need to be. So if you're on the ground floor, you're having those conversations with a municipality that hasn't set the rules in stone yet, you're going to be in a position to move on, property knowing, it's going to be in a good spot or not. So if you're willing to put the work in and then spend some time and develop those relationships we've told you repeatedly you should be developing with your municipality anyway, it also gives you the benefit of having the knowledge to know where to target.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, you made a huge point there, communication. I've said it a number of times in the past. Travis has and Nick has. As we've done our posts, it's a common theme. If we've seen any of our advice along the way, is transparency, communication. I had the pleasure of meeting with the city manager in a pretty substantial city here, and I'm not going to say where yet, but the point being is they appreciated the meeting. It wasn't we weren't pushed out. We weren't told no. Where we were a year ago isn't where we're at today. We're a year farther. We have a real data set to talk about. We have 9 pre-quals with the state of Michigan. We have the intent of the state to add board meetings, as we saw in the recent Laura update. Sorry. And the point being is that, like you said earlier, these communities that have been waiting for things to happen, there is things happening, and that excuse is no longer available to them.
Right. In another regard, too, I mean, I've had a few recent conversations where they didn't appreciate it until afterwards, and then they realized when we were done talking that, it wasn't what they were expecting.
That's right.
So, getting out there, even if there's a little resistance at first, I mean, it's their job as a municipality to talk to their constituents or people interested in doing business in their community. They might, you might get the impression from those people in administration and those officials that they're not into this. Well, they may never truly talk to a professional, motivated operator or operating hopeful.
Yeah.
And if you get someone in a room and you talk to them professionally, you lay it out for them realistically what you're actually trying to do, you might find that those barriers that were arbitrarily raised up start cracking, and you start getting some work done.
Absolutely. We didn't go in with the idea either, and I'll use yesterday's example as a good example of it, where we knew going into the meeting, where we wanted to be, what we wanted to do. We brought in plans. We showed them, what other operations that we have already started working on, and it was done professionally, like we're developers and that we're in the business of doing the widget of cannabis. And it was appreciated from the city side because it wasn't just like, hey, if you do this, I might come here and then, thank you for talking. It was, we had a real plan. Mm-hmm. It was a professional plan. And I think that again, it was complimented on our way out of, we appreciated it. But what we're also trying to do is help to, allow these city and municipal officials to get a new vision of this industry.
Right.
In every presentation I do, I try to show them what the medicine will look like. We try to show what storefronts that are invested in will look like. Right.
And depending on what type of license you're pursuing as well, most communities hear marijuana and go immediately to provisioning centers and dispensaries. If that's not your play, if you're on the manufacturing or testing side of things, walking in there and getting past their initial gut reaction to marijuana and talking to them about how you're actually just a private, regulated, commercial wholesale manufacturer, and you're providing products to stores that are going to be located in other communities. Once they understand and wrap their head around the type of conduct you're actually trying to do, maybe they start thinking about your business differently than, oh, I don't want a dispensary in my town, or
That's right.
A dispensary doesn't seem like it'd be appropriate for a community of our size.
Brad brought up a good question. First, Brad, thank you for the compliment on the map. We work hard at it. Ryan, our social media guru here, works very, very hard at keeping our content up. It's our pleasure to provide the free content. That is something we take a lot of pride in, is why we do these shows and whatnot. But the question you're asking about power grid, there are definitely soft spots around the state of Michigan where power is an issue. First and foremost, we should have backup generators. We should have augmented power at every facility, whether you're in the middle of the city of Detroit or Flint or Lansing that has unlimited power effectively, there are still power outages, and you want to protect your investment. So we're seeing some communities that are questioning plans that don't have backup generators and whatnot. Separate than that, though, is the consideration of working with consumers, working with DTE, working with Michigan Power, whoever it is that services the community that you're in, and talking with different business development folk from the from the power companies, which we've done quite a bit of over the last several months, trying to help these facilities find what they need. They want engagement because you know what, you might not be the only person that's asking for additional power in a substation or new could be the investment that they're going to make, and they can provide supplemental power and then ultimately provide a better substation, and that investment is needed based on power usage. And what you might not realize is your neighbor 2 miles up the street that could rely upon the same portion of the grid is also seeking that augmented power. And so
it can be your pitch to that community about how allowing conduct like this to be licensed in that area might be beneficial to the community as a whole if it solves the power issues. On top of that, before you go start approaching communities about trying to do something, you should have a pretty good idea what your power needs are. And if you do think you're going to need a higher amount of draw from the grid, maybe you should put that into consideration when you're targeting locations to seek a facility.
And the timing of those locations, because even if you get your approval and you start to build it and all that, you still might be 6 months out on their development to bring you the power. So you might want to think about how you scale differently. Maybe work as a clone farm or
I treat an issue like that just like a provisioning center would treat a population issue. You can go to a community and have an idea about a type of provisioning center you'd like to operate, and have that community license you and get a state license. But if you're not thinking about, well, where are my consumers coming from? Your business might not have enough customers to be revenue positive. So just like a provisioning center needs to think about where their consumers are going to come from, a community that's relying on higher levels of power to operate their facility needs to think about where their power is coming from. And a sophisticated business will have an understanding of what their needs are and what the needs are available for the locations they're targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So another big municipality that had a major update this week was the City of Warren. We've talked about them in the past.
We had a fun video with them.
Yeah, so it's a recurring theme, but maybe this is the final end game for it.
Yeah, and you were there for almost each of these events, right? Yeah, so can we get a quick history of what happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so Warren has been a long slog, and I do think that they are a linchpin for that Macomb County into Oakland, like that whole area, and we're going to start to probably see some townships and communities around it. Hopefully, begin to change their tune of hair. But what Warren did is in their deliberate process of going through the marijuana committee, and then they had a draft ordinance we talked about in the past that was actually no good. They revisited it, they rewrote it, they followed some other communities' versions of it. Ultimately, they presented one to City Council a couple weeks back on April 9th that was approved and added 10 new provisioning centers, up to 10 provisioning centers in C3 zone districts, 1,000 feet from residential, as well as buffered in some other schools and whatnot. But one of the areas they included was the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, but excluding what they deemed to be the Downtown Center District. Well, that didn't pass muster with their mayor, so Mayor Fouts vetoed it. And then just this past Tuesday, the city retook it up, and in a passionate support for themselves, each council member took time to explain why they are voting to override the veto.
Right. It was a really great discussion. I think they still have the video up on their website.
Yeah.
I'd encourage, if you're working with communities or you have some communities that are kind of, not really diving deep or really seeing the reasons why they want to do this, it's worth maybe a watch or pointing people to it to see how those Warren officials, discussed it.
It was about a 15, 20-minute discussion, give or take, maybe a little bit more. Maybe it just felt like it was that short because it don't seem to be so good. But it's about an hour into the meeting. They bring that topic up. And I point that out because, throughout the entire process, And trust me, there was a lot of meetings, be it planning, be it exploratory, all of them. But one thing that never really showed was any passion from any council member. They kind of were just listening to the people. They were talking. They'd ask questions. There was a little bit of engagement, and then a document would show up, and then we complain about the document. We try to add our features to it. Got them to consider changes that we didn't like, and as an industry. But ultimately, in the end, when they finally spoke about why they were voting for it, it was something to be seen, because even the people that and there's a handful of them that are conservative on this panel that, quite frankly, weren't sure which way they'd vote, but they were solidly in support of it, and their reasoning was sound, and their reasoning was passion, and their reasoning was protection of the businesses and protection of the patients and the protection of the community, trying to get it out of basements, and it was nice.
Right. It's encouraging to see that from a municipal source as opposed to an advocacy industry side source.
And it's nice to also think too that our work as advocates, our work as speaking out, our work as reaching these communities by email, by calls, by trying to engage them, by trying to have meetings, by trying to educate, is actually being absorbed. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that as we get into the rec bill and as we get past the medical, that is also going to have to be continuous. There's a continuity to this that is important, because that overall ability to knock off a little bit of fear of the industry and showing them how operators will be and showing the professionalism involved is the stepping stone to the next phase.
Right. And truly, the only real quality argument opposition the marijuana industry has is fear of the unknown. Like, everyone who takes the time to research and understand what medical marijuana does and how these different licensing programs, not only in Michigan but in other states, are trying to ensure it's safe and implemented correctly, once they see that in action, you see those concerns fall away. It's only in states that haven't implemented true licensing systems that you see those arguments brought up. You hear all this fear-mongering coming about how all these mature marijuana licensing states are having all these problems, but you go visit those states and you don't see any of it, because it's just not true.
Right.
There's always going to be issues with a system, especially new systems, and there's going to be kinks to work out, and there's going to be unintended, errors that when concept didn't quite pan out the way they were supposed to. But that's any law in any industry and any new program. So just because the system needs to make adjustments doesn't mean the overall goal of that system is flawed.
Right.
So it's and again, as we talked about in the previous video, medical marijuana will be a separate license from recreational marijuana, but they are tie-bar. They are important to encourage both to happen. I think I discussed this with Nick when we had our video a couple of videos ago, but for the first several years of the recreational adult use program, commercial licenses need to be issued to people who have obtained medical licenses.
Yep.
So if you're not out there encouraging your communities to allow medical licensing in their jurisdictions, then you're going to be behind the curve when it comes to allowing those businesses to open as recreational type licenses.
Right, absolutely, because they can't do it without being medical first. So, well, I know we gave a pretty long summation of our update here. I think that was a little bit of our intent today, because there's so much activity going on. Certainly, as if you are watching this video after the fact, and as it's posted on YouTube, and you'll see our link here at the bottom of the screen, where we have all our videos posted. I feel free to ask more questions about it. There's a lot of uncertainty that's out there. We're doing our best to stay in front of it and provide that information. But you may know something too that you heard or want to share with us that could be helpful to our understanding of it as well. There's no source that we think we can't learn from, including the board, including watching how they react to these applications, and us, of course, making adjustments to our applications from here on out. With that in mind, let's transition into an application topic. We'll just take a few minutes here and finish up our video on one of the requirements of the phase 2 of our application is a copy of a marketing plan. Talk a little bit about where that comes from.
So a marketing plan is effectively how you're going to lay out your marketing and advertising, the way you're going to run this business. Unlike some of the other plans that are going to be long, very complicated documents, depending on where you're at right now, as this is a new industry in Michigan, you might not have a very fleshed out marketing approach right now. But just like the other step 2 documentation, what you're truly doing is laying a foundation for a compliant future. You need to demonstrate to the state that you're aware of municipal restrictions and state level restrictions on the advertising of your products or services. Specifically for certain types of products, there are Emergency Rule 42 says you're prohibited from marketing medical marijuana, targeting an audience if you're 17 years of age or older. You're prohibited from having marketing, targeting, public space. You can't have medical marijuana products and advertising, on view on like sidewalk trafficked areas. If you're going to be advertising, on other sources, there are an appropriate place for those advertisements to occur, and there's inappropriate places for those advertisements to occur. You can't run TV commercials on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, obviously, right? But what's more important is, laying out a foundation for what your marketing is going to be. Are you going to have any? Are you going to have a website? How are you going to make sure that your labeling is going to, include the appropriate language to be compliant? If you're working with known, third parties like Weed Maps and Leafly and some of these places,
right.
How are you doing it?
Well, and I think, the state's going to do a good job, as we'll see in their, as this emergency rule transitions into the final rule, they're going to restrict how you can advertise in terms of, billboards and stuff like that, but also, how it could maybe be attractive to kids and everything else. But I think that the overall arching advice, and this will be true of all of these plans that are in the end, is don't overstate things that you can't do.
Definitely.
It's one thing to say we intend to follow the rules and kind of lay out that you are knowledgeable of the rules and what your plans are and that you plan to evolve those. But, we know for facility planning, which I'm sure, was discussed in an earlier topic, they're going to be holding you accountable to what you say you plan to do.
Right.
And so it might not be as easy in a marketing plan to hold you accountable at the beginning of your licensing, but by year 2, they're going to ask you more about what you have done and try to match up what it is you said and expressed you were doing. Right. And so while a facility plan, they can say, well, you said you were going to set it up this way, and now your plans have changed. Why have you made this substantive material change to your planning? Whereas in a marketing plan, it'll be, again, year 2, we're going to be looking at how you operated, what you did right, how you maintained compliance, how you acted and followed through on what your planning was, and what adjustments were made and the reasoning for those adjustments. So as I look at the marketing plan, I think this is an area where you try to stay within the framework of describing how you'll follow the rules, but leave yourself that room and flexibility to say that we still need to see how our investment is going to be, deployed from the company. But we intend to follow the rules, of course, and so allow the natural progression and organic growth to decide that.
And just like all of these plans, just because the state's requiring you to submit it, it's also an opportunity to do something you should be doing anyway. You should be thinking about what your overall approach and brand is going to be. You should be thinking about what types of logo, slogan, display you want to have when you present your business and your services and products to the market. If you've developed some sort of IP, copyright, trademarked materials, explain them and how they're used in your plan. If you have kind of a 5-year model where you're hoping to develop into new brand categories, you don't necessarily have to tell the state what they're going to be, but I think it would be appropriate, at least for yourselves, to talk about what growth would mean and what that would not only mean for how your business is going to run, but how that business is going to try to expand into that marketplace. If you're wholesaling products, what types of products are you going to be making? You should have a basic idea of that. But how are you going to make those products marketable to the provisioning centers that want to sell them? If you're a provisioning center, what kind of point of sale are you trying to operate, and how are you going to get people into the store?
And Brad, you've asked the question, is attending trade shows a form of marketing? It would be. I mean, how are you getting your product to market? If I'm a grower, while I want my brand known to patients, the purchaser of my product are processors and provisioning centers directly. I can't get it onto a shelf unless the provisioning center knows that I'm there. So trade shows is an opportunity to demonstrate your wares amongst other parties to the industry. It's also a great place to pick up ancillary equipment and other things that might drive your cost down as the wholesale cost of flower drops. You're going to need to be producing at better, more efficient pricing. And so again, that's a great forum to allow all the Pixes and Axes to meet the operators and for the operators to meet people to market and sell to.
And with the exception of provisioning centers who are aiming a lot of their availability to patients and caregivers, the other license types, including provisioning centers, are business-to-business relationships you need to develop. And if trade shows are a way for you to develop those relationships, maybe you should account and plan on attending some.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And, you've heard us speak about it. I think Barton and I did one of our earlier Facebook posts from the NCIA event last spring. Participating in those shows, both locally and at national levels, is a tremendous way to get your PhD in this industry. Definitely. There's so much to learn, so many more techniques, so many more ways to do it. As we scale up in Michigan and grow out of this caregiver model, encouraging people to see these, industrial facilities in other states that are operating similar to where we'll be, Colorado, Oregon, Washington in particular. But even those that are in Arizona are recognizing, of course, a greenhouse in the desert is not the same as a greenhouse in northern Michigan. There's going to be factors you need to factor in that you have to deal with in terms of temperature and climate and all that. But, we as always try to keep our shows to about 30 minutes, so we're kind of running, at that time frame now. But, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the input. Please follow through with any, new ordinances, new communities that you see online. We'd love to keep our map up to date. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook. And we will be bringing you another show next week. So for Craig Aronoff,
Travis Copenhaver,
we'll see you then. Thank you very much.